about the new Star Trek movies. I got to confess. That's kind of on the side, but trying to see if I could get a couple tips. We did start talking about the new Mr. Sulu, and the question came up, is there going to be some sword play? And evidently there is, although I guess in this rendition Mr. Sulu will be in a spacesuit, right? So we got to imagine a future. And I wanted to ask, but I couldn't ask, are you going to make a cameo in this movie that's coming out?
No.
No. But we will remember and imagine into a future that's coming right up, and I'm certainly going to be there to see the new imaginations of the Star Trek movie. But I should go back to the program and say that, of course, yeah, I used to watch Star Trek. Okay. That Mr. Takei is best known, of course, for his portrayal of Mr. Sulu in the acclaimed television series Star Trek. But in addition to that, he's been in more than 30 feature films and hundreds of television guest starring roles. He has these to his credit. Our second speaker will be Eric Nakamura, who I'm sure many of you know as the co-founder and publisher of the Giant Robot magazine. Eric's sensei, or a third-generation Japanese-American from the Los Angeles area who grew up in a very typical Japanese-American household. He's also, I guess I can throw in, out of UCLA and a Bruin. And I had something to say about both these gentlemen in regard to the conference, and I don't have it scripted out, but let me just try to do my best, which is returning to the idea of creativity and vision. I'm so honored that we have these two guest speakers, because I think both of them have had already sustained, of course, Mr. Takei, who's been in the business for many years, but also Eric, I think, has a very sustained career and reputation for creativity and vision that we're just pleased as punch when they agreed to come out, because I think they both exemplify the kinds of imagined futures that we're talking about. I think the last thing I wanted to bring up, though, is I think for both of our key speakers this afternoon, engagement is really a watchword. And both of them could have rested on their laurels and could have rested on acclaim, but I think both of them have been involved in community building and our community organizations that are very much part of the network that I hope will be sustained as we go into the future, whichever future it is, utopia or dystopia. So that much said, please join me in welcoming our first keynote speaker this afternoon, Mr. George Takei.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and thank you, Dr. Hirabayashi, for the introduction. I feel particularly honored to be introduced by such a distinguished Trekkie. It's a pleasure to be here to share some thoughts with you. And I want to thank Koji and Emily and certainly Dr. Hirabayashi for his contribution to bringing about this program. I think it's a vitally important discussion that we're going to be having this afternoon. While musing on this, well, I thought of what we did this morning. My nephew's daughter, 8 years old, has been studying violin, and she had her violin recital today. And so Uncle Brad and Uncle George were there. As a matter of fact, we bought her that violin that she played, and we have high expectations of her. And she lived up to it. She was brilliant. We thought she was the best violinist in that recital. And of course, we're biased, but I think, you know, there was a good consensus that she was great. She was the only one that performed her recital without her music. She had it all memorized. We really thought she was brilliant. And while driving from that recital to Little Tokyo, I thought of the newspaper that I read this morning, or newspapers. I read the New York Times and the LA Times. And the headline's full of dire news. We have the swine flu, and we're not supposed to be shaking hands. And we were shaking hands all over. Some people were even hugging each other. We are in dire straits here. The newspaper also told us that last week there were more American soldiers that died in Iraq than ever before in the last few years. And over 350 Iraqis died. The economy around us is falling apart. Chrysler declared bankruptcy. Two of our banking pillars are wobbly. Citibank and Bank of America. CEOs are being fired left and right. And I thought of that phrase that I think we all know, the Chinese phrase, may you live in interesting times. Some people consider that phrase a curse, a Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Others think it is a blessing. I think it's a given in what we make of our lives. May we live in interesting times where we have both blessings and curses. And as artists particularly, we need to be mindful of the interesting times that we live in. Not, what our grandparents lived in, or not the time to come. We live in interesting times. People say, think out of the box. Artists should not have boxes to worry about. We should not have those limitations. Those boxes are created by us. We can dig deep into ourselves or reach out to the larger world. We artists must not have any limitations. We are shaped by our times, by our families, by the communities that we are part of, by the nation that has nurtured us, and because we live now in a global society, we live in that larger world. And we need to be engaged with all of that, and knowing who and what and how we were shaped.